So I want to keep this talk, Emir Hashem, very, very tachlis. I want to also leave time for questions. I usually like to start with some sort of mindfulness practice, something to bring us together. I'm not going to do that today for the sake of time, but just know that that is something that if you are facilitating any sort of group space, I do recommend starting with some sort of way of just bringing everybody's attention here, leveling us out, leaving the stuff behind and coming here right now. So today's talk is on practical guidance for seminary staff to best help your students in this urgent time of need. I'm hoping to cover a few really crucial points that I'm just kind of repeating over and over again. And I think these are particularly going to be helpful for you in helping your students. So the first point that I think everybody is having lots of access to, but I want to underscore one particular aspect of it is crisis strategies. Crisis strategies are what people often refer to as coping strategies, grounding techniques, relaxation strategies. It has many names. And these are things that are immediately relaxing or calming. I will share some strategies, but I first want to share when to use this, because I think that that's the most important part of understanding crisis strategies is about the when rather than the what. So the when of crisis strategies is that we use crisis strategies for the short term. They are not ever going to solve a problem. I remember a teacher one time sharing with me that they had a student who had significant mental health issues, and they had this whole crisis plan with them with all these different ideas. And they said, I don't understand why this student isn't getting any better. Honestly, I don't know the student. I don't know the full picture, but from hearing you talk about this student, it sounds like they're great at doing their crisis strategies, but that doesn't change anything. So ultimately, we're going to have to follow up crisis strategies with other things. And at the same time, giving your students access to ideas for crisis strategies while also giving them context for when crisis strategies are relevant and helpful is really valuable. So I think the two main things with crisis strategies are decreasing immediate and intense physiological arousal, number one. Number two is taking care of your body, because there's a body-based, when we are in high levels of distress, our bodies respond. So we want to also take care of our body. And then also we want to distract, just to kind of allow the mental part of what's going on off the table so we can come and deal with whatever is more effectively. So I'm going to give you some ideas for each of those. Decreasing the intense level of physiological arousal, meaning, and by that I mean when I'm like hysterical, and I'm sure you've seen students over the last few days who have reached a place of hysteria where they're maybe sobbing or screaming or breathing like this, or talking in a very panicked way, or saying things that don't make sense, or I've even heard some other pretty wild stories. So I'm sure you've been exposed to it all. When there's that really high level of body-based arousal or distress, we want to bring that intensity down very, very quickly. So some ways of doing that are by encouraging. Now you'll hear many different techniques for breathing, I'm sure, and really breathing should just be left alone to breathing. But I will share that what the science consistently says is that the most important thing in terms of decreasing physiological distress is long, slow out breaths. This is so hard when I can't see anybody, but okay, bearing with that. So if you want to send anything in the chat box, any feedback, questions is always appreciated and helpful. Okay, so decreasing immediate physiological arousal can include long, slow out breaths. The reason this works is because when we are in our fight or flight response or in our distressed response, we're going to be taking in more oxygen, like I was demonstrating before. So in order to activate the opposite system, we want to focus on long, slow out breaths. It activates the opposite system, like okay. And the second thing I mentioned is taking care of our bodies. So that obviously can include those crisis responses that are in high levels of distress, but it also can be something like taking a shower or getting a hug, or putting on lotion, things that are just based in your body and are calming your body down. The last important thing in terms of crisis techniques is distraction. So just talking about something else, just asking about, what classes are you taking this year? Or what's your favorite class so far? Or who are your roommates? Are you getting along with them? Just distracting and talking about something else can be really, really helpful. Okay, so that's to wrap up on that topic. That's crisis strategies. And you'll see many handouts going around, many different coping strategies or ideas going around. But understand, most importantly, more than the what of what the different ideas are, most important really is when to use those, which is when we're in high levels of emotional distress, use crisis management strategies, but also understand that they are only short-term useful. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is what you do next, which is fill yourself up. So you can only maintain not crisis mode. You can only stay out of crisis mode if you are filling yourself up so you're not hitting that. We're all emotionally vulnerable right now, myself and all of you included, because of the situation. So we are all more emotionally fragile, and therefore we are all more emotionally available or vulnerable to crisis, to emotional crisis. So in order to decrease that, coping strategies or crisis strategies are not going to be sufficient. You can have all the crisis strategies in the world. You can go running and you can take certain special breathing techniques and you can hire a yoga teacher, and it's not going to be enough if you are not doing the work to decrease your general vulnerability. And managing basically the rest of the not crisis time. So filling yourself up looks like a few different things. First of all, I like to talk about taking emotion vitamins. This is in general useful for seminary students. I recommend teaching it at the beginning of every school year for just building up basic emotional resiliency. But taking emotion vitamins looks like doing on a daily basis things that fill us up and taking care of our basic physical needs. So I'll talk about both. First of all, taking care of our basic emotion vitamins. Doing daily things that fill us up are things that I like to split it into 4 categories. There's things that are pleasant, things that give us a sense of accomplishment. This is, by the way, a common one for young adults, is that they all of a sudden don't get a sense of accomplishment. Like maybe in high school, maybe they were kind of forced to do certain basic things that kept them going, but they hit young adulthood and they don't have those same things. And it's very common for this to fall off and they kind of feel like senseless, purposeless, aimless. And you see that like failure to launch situation. So giving them ways of accomplishing things. Values-based action, so doing things on a daily basis that align with our values, and social connection. Having those 4 things happen on a daily basis with intention, right, is really valuable in filling us up, reducing our vulnerability and increasing our basic resiliency tanks, okay? The other piece I talked about is taking care of the physical. It is totally understandable to not be eating well right now, to not be sleeping well right now, and the more out of whack, and not to have our basic routines kept up, and the more that those things are not happening, the worse our emotional vulnerability is doing. So anything we can do to promote going to sleep on time and waking up on time, eating regularly and consistently foods that fill us well, and getting in regular and consistent movement, okay, that can often get thrown off, and having a similar basic routine is really, really valuable. It's also in terms of filling your tank up is making meaning. Like if we kind of sit around with the situation and just deal with the hysteria, then we can keep the hysteria at bay, but we never get beyond that because we're just gonna keep hitting the hysteria over and over and over again. In order to have less hysteria or less crisis, we need to be able to fill our tanks up. So I talked already about taking our emotion vitamins, but the second thing I want to talk about is making meaning. So I am certain that the seminaries are giving their students shirim and hashkafa around this. The more that you can do that, the more that you can help your students to have a framework for understanding or thinking about this that is meaningful, that fills up their tanks, that leads to less crisis. A nice activity could be to take something that's meaningful to them. Like, let's say if somebody gave a class on Einod Milvado or or whatever it is. Students can be encouraged to make a sign that they hang up by their bed with this like mantra or quote that's meaningful to them or helps them think about this differently. Or they can hang it in the Cheder Mugan, or they can make it the background of their phone. Something like that will be a way of keeping it on your mind that you have a way of making meaning of this or of understanding this. You can, and then the third thing I want to talk about in terms of filling your tank is contributing. So many people right now in America and in Israel are asking, what can I do? The reason that is the most automatic reaction is because, first of all, Klal Yisrael is amazing, but also because when we feel anxiety, that's a sense of lack of control. And we have a lack of control right now. That is true. And that is very much in our faces. And the more in our face that is, the more likely we are to crave some sort of control. If I can contribute, I get an increased sense of I can do something about this. That brings down my anxiety. That's really helpful. So any way that your students can contribute and you can assist them in making this happen, by organizing tefillah, by organizing any ways of like donating either obviously money or time, anything that they can do to contribute at all. Even like kind of reminding them that their Lima Torah is a zechus, or that their being here is a zechus. Anything that can just kind of ground them in their contribution gives more of a sense of increased control and helps me to hit less crisis. I also just wanted to talk about you mentioned Torah classes and contributing. The third element was emotion vitamins. In terms of filling up our tanks so we hit crises less often, there's taking emotion vitamins, making meaning, and contributing. Okay, anxiety, I wanted to talk about because that's, I think, like the main thing on every educator and parent's mind right now, and probably everyone else as well, but particularly educators. I'm assuming somebody just got unmuted. And I don't have ability to mute them, but somebody will figure this out. Okay. So anxiety is a totally normal emotion. All emotions are normal. Hashem created all of them. This is, I hope, is not like confusing. I hope this is very clear that emotions were not made up as these are not man-made things. These are the way Hashem made us. He made us with these basic responses called emotions that are actually fantastically valuable. Every single emotion has a very valuable function. Anxiety or fear, I just talk about it as a catch-all, but it really catches everything. Overwhelm, fear, anxiety, nervousness, stress, worry are all under the same category. They work the same way. So fear's function is to protect us from danger. When there is a perceived danger, any perceived threat or danger, we will respond with fear. Fear motivates us to protect ourselves. That's fantastic. So the fact that your students feel anxiety is normal and great. It's a great thing. To a degree, some anxiety is helpful. Some anxiety motivates us to make sure that our Cheder Mugan is stocked with things like water and phone chargers, to make sure that we understand what to do in case of an emergency, and we have some emergency preparedness to help us to be encouraging extra tefillah right now, or the fact that we've decided to as a klal to have Bein Hazmanim end early is all coming from that healthy anxiety or that healthy fear, obviously to whatever degree. So some anxiety, depending on the situation, is helpful. More than the amount that is warranted by the actual danger of the situation is not helpful. And what we want to do is not do what it's telling us. So if there's any anxiety that's more than what's helpful, it's going to be telling us to do things that are unhelpful. Like, I can't come to class, I'm too overwhelmed. That's not helpful anxiety. It's not protecting us from danger. We don't want to do that. In fact, not going to class is going to actually increase your anxiety. I would rather you come and realize that you're okay and you can handle it, and that's going to lead to a decrease in that intensity. It's very important to answer questions with facts, not with anything else, not with reassurance, not with hashkafa. I'll explain the context for hashkafa, but not here, because it dismisses the question as like an unacceptable, or as not an okay question to ask, or as there's no answer, so you actually are really in danger. And it erodes trust, and it keeps us from being able to establish safety. So therefore, when students ask questions, it is so important to answer with facts or with "I don't know. Let's find out." Okay. Or "I will find out." I said we don't want to provide hashkafa here. I'm going to say now, and this is the last point I wanted to focus on, and then I'll open for a few questions. How can we prevent, if possible, PTSD or severe trauma reactions from what's happening right now? The most important thing in acute stress or in acute trauma situations like what we're having right now is expression. What I mean, but that's my term. I don't know that that's the term that the whole psychological community uses, but I'm using that as a catch-all phrase for pretty much all of the research I've seen on this topic, which is that the most important thing is to allow people who are in acute trauma to express themselves without any curtailing at all. Which means I don't want to be providing any reassurance. I don't want to be providing any editing. I don't want to be providing any processing. I don't want to be providing any hashkafa in response to expression. So somebody shares their experience and you say, "Wow, that's so much," or "Thank you for sharing with me," whatever it is, but no more than that. Because expressing and expressing and expressing and expressing enables us to process our own experiences and to have healthy reactions that we can move forward with. The more that the environment curtails or edits or provides reassurance or doesn't allow for our full expressive reactions, like let's say somebody responds with hysteria or with anger or with things that are quite fear addict, though we might be really, really having the urge to edit that, right? That like, that's so unhealthy. Don't think that way. Or that's not true. Hashem does love you, right? Whatever it is, we notice that urge, but any of that comes out provides like a disallowance of the person's experience, which doesn't allow for proper processing. So the most important thing is stop and listen. Don't say anything. Where does healthy hashkafa come in? Not in response to expression. And by the way, by expression, I mean talking, writing, singing, coloring. Any form of expressing our experience is useful in our own processing of our experiences. No responses from the environment that edit that response. But where is hashkafa appropriate? Back where I was talking about making meaning in a general way, on a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis. Having ways of sharing healthy hashkafos is really, really valuable, not in direct response to people's expression. Okay, I do want to mention that Relief Israel and Amudim Israel are excellent referral sources. They can really help connect your students with proper resources if you need extra help. My name, I don't know if I even said my name in the beginning. My name is Dr. Chaya Lieba Kobernick. I'm founder and director at the CBT DBT Center. We're also happy to be a resource for you. And I hope that this was helpful. So just to summarize, and then you can please share any questions you have in the chat box. I'll stay on for another probably 5-10 minutes. So I talked about crisis strategies, both what they are essentially and when to use them, which is, like I said, like the most important part, which is not all the time. It's only in a crisis. And the rest of the time, we need to be doing these other things, which are filling ourselves up. We fill ourselves up by taking our emotion vitamins, by making meaning, and by contributing. Anxiety is normal. Answer questions with facts, not with reassurance. And that's how we prevent PTSD, hopefully, hopefully, by allowing for constant expression of our experience without curtailing, without editing. So I hope this was helpful. And if I see any questions come in, I will answer them. I'm going to stay on for another minute or two or whatever. Somebody's asking, what are the emotion vitamins? Emotion vitamins are, we have actually, if you go on our website and search emotion vitamins, you'll see a blog post that explains it also. But the emotion vitamins are doing like on a daily or a regular consistent basis. And this can actually be really helpful in terms of building routine right now when things might be off schedule. But doing things that are pleasant for us, give us a sense of accomplishment. Values-based action, or doing things that are aligned with our values. Social connection. Those are the 4 things we want to do on a daily basis. And then also taking care of our physical needs, which are getting sufficient and appropriate sleep at appropriate hours. Reminder that teenagers actually have a rhythm that's off, meaning they are actually more tired in the morning. I know schools don't like to hear that, but I do like to share that. So consistent and regular, great quality sleep, as good quality as possible, regular and consistent eating and movement, keeping to some sort of routine. Those are all helpful in terms of taking care of our physical. How does this fit with challenging cognitive distortions? So first of all, we do not challenge cognitive distortions during or in the immediate aftermath of trauma. Period. Nikuda sof pasuk. We don't do that. That is very, very potentially dangerous for developing PTSD, because it doesn't allow for that full processing. So I don't think this fits with challenging cognitive distortions at all. That is something that we would do in PTSD treatment if PTSD were to develop, which would only develop. We would only consider it true PTSD if it developed several months after a traumatic event. Then we would do that work then. But at this point, in order to not develop that, we want to allow for full expression, including the distortions or whatever, the unhelpful ways of thinking. I prefer calling it like unhelpful thinking styles. So we would want to challenge that later. But at this point, we want to allow for all of that, because most people will go through those all different ways of thinking and will auto-correct themselves through expressing, through processing, through going through that. How can we help students deal with the uncertainty? So sitting with uncertainty is very uncomfortable. You can remind students that uncertainty is actually not any more dangerous than our regular day-to-day basis. Okay, we are always uncertain, and our actual safety is always an illusion. I always give the example that one person could be like dying of cancer, and then the person next to them gets like killed by a rocket, right? Who's in more danger right now? The person who's about to be killed by a rocket, or the person who's dying from cancer? So everyone would think the person who's dying from cancer is really unsafe. They are dying, but then the other person is the one who actually died. So our safety is always an illusion. The only one in charge of our actual safety, of our actual versus perceived safety, is Hashem. So there is no true safety. It's an illusion. But how do we have a perceived sense of safety? By sitting with the fact that bad things happen and they usually don't. Bad things happen and they usually don't. We sit with that, and that's what gives us an ability to sit with the basic lack of sense of safety we might be feeling right now. Also, I did mention the value of contributing. Contributing gives us an increased sense of control. Also, answering questions, giving facts and information, answering questions helps decrease that sense of lack of certainty or lack of whatever. But we do have to sit with an element of uncertainty always as part of how Hashem created the universe on purpose. This is how he created it, in order for us to struggle in lack of clarity, in order for us to be able to actually like have a real relationship with him and serve him. Okay, bigger hashkafos, not for now. I can hold that, and I can also be okay. So if you can help your students with contributing, with gathering information, with preparing any way they can for safety, that can help deal with uncertainty. Somebody else sent in, what do you suggest? And I guess this will be our last question. What do you suggest to students who are not sleeping, scared of alarms at night, and are making knee-jerk reactions to go home because they're so overwhelmed and they just want to be with family and not functioning, can't sit through class? So first of all, crisis management strategies are for when we're in crisis. It sounds like some of these students are in crisis. So crisis management strategies will help with getting to sleep, getting some sleep. You can always encourage whatever sleep they can get is valuable. Anything that they can do to help themselves relax and get to sleep is valuable. Like, we want to be just super supportive of getting sleep somehow, some way is really, really important. And wanting Right. But they also want to leave tomorrow. Right. So listen, in terms of students leaving, like wanting to leave tomorrow, that's ultimately their decision and we can't control that. All we can provide is that, listen, we are always, you can just as easily die in America as you can die here. Like that can always happen. We always have, like I said before, we always have an illusion of safety or lack of safety, and it's not actually based in reality. Um, and um, and oh, and you're going to blow your whole year. Like that will be really, really disappointing. There's a lot to be gained by being here right now, a lot, and you're going to blow it. And that's going to be sad for you. And that's it. So if you could give it a little bit of time so you make a wise, like a choice that's based in what's really aligned for you, I would recommend that. But obviously, their choices are their own choices and we can't control that. What we can do is in terms of just supporting staying as much in like a calmer, more regulated state. Whatever you can do to encourage that would be really, really valuable. So I hope this was helpful. And Batzlacha Rabba, you're doing amazing work. And yeah, hard times and thinking of you. Take care.